Puerto Rican activism in the United States begins in Chicago, and don't let anyone tell you any different. Puerto Ricans began moving to Chicago in the 1930s and 40s in small numbers, but the population really began to thrive and expand in the 1950s. In the beginning, it was mostly Puerto Ricans from New York that migrated to Chicago, but over the years it changed and it became people that were from the island as well. The migration mainly took place because of economic reasons, with factories in the Chicagoland area recruiting Puerto Ricans to work there. Puerto Ricans began setting up their homes in areas like the very famous Humboldt Park. The journey was not without its challenges. Racism, discrimination, police brutality, and even attempts to gentrify the neighborhood under the guise of urban revitalization. But the community, along with their leaders, stood strong. And today, the Humboldt Park community is a model nationwide for resilience, both economically and culturally. I'm here at the National Museum for Puerto Rican Arts and Culture in the Humboldt Park neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois. This is the only freestanding museum dedicated to Puerto Rican arts and culture outside of the island of Puerto Rico. It was started in 2000 with the purpose and goal exclusively to promote the art of Puerto Rican people throughout the diaspora. But the thing that I love about this museum is that it celebrates all aspects of Puerto Rican culture. For example, behind me, we have a painting by Rafael Tufino. And essentially, it is the celebration of the eradication of the institution of slavery on the island. In 1873 to 1973, it celebrates the 100 years where slavery was abolished on the island of Puerto Rico. Another thing that I love about the Puerto Rican Museum here is the acknowledgement that although we are here now, we are built on ancestral lands. And they have a land acknowledgement here that states such. This space that I'm in Chicago, Illinois, has paintings. And one of the interesting paintings that I see here is this one. It's of this man. His name is Oscar Lopez Rivera. And it says 29 years is too long. Bring him home.
Okay, so La Casita has the honor of being the welcoming center for former Puerto Rican political prisoners who, every time they were released, they would come here given a community welcome, after their release. So we have Lolita Lebron, and she obviously she was released or given a pardon in 1979, and she came here in 1997 to inaugurate the Casita. And of course, Carlos Alberto Torres in 2010. And finally, May 18th, Oscar Lopez Rivera, he came here. There was a procession that led him here. There was thousands of people, as you can imagine, greeting and, welcoming and escorting Oscar Lopez into La Casita, where he was given a community welcome, dance, a bombazo, and then from here, we marched a giant procession to Humboldt Park near the boathouse, where we had more larger celebrations.
The statue in front of me is of a very infamous figure in Puerto Rico, and it's this man. His name is Don Albizu Campos. He's a Puerto Rican freedom fighter. I've talked about him here before, but the interesting thing about this statue is how it came to be in Chicago, because the city of Chicago has two statues of Pedro Albizu Campos. The reason is, the first one was declined because they said it didn't meet the structural standards for the weather that Chicago goes through. They offered the aldermen $300,000 and 30 jobs to make sure that they didn't build the statue. But the city and the area said absolutely not. And they raised the money the second time, and they were able to build something that was up to code. And it was this one that's right in front of me. The interesting thing about this statue is that he's standing on the island of Puerto Rico. And the flag that's here is the same flag that was used for El Grito de Lares, a rebellion against Spanish imperial rule. One of the things I love about Humboldt Park and the Puerto Rican community here is the amount of times people are given second chances, not only in life, but in opportunity as well. I recently sat down with an older person and they told me their story, but I'm not going to reiterate it. I'm going to let them tell it.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Humboldt Park. I grew up on Kedzie between Beach and Hirsch. At a time where a lot of Latino families didn't want to raise their children in this community because of the violence, because of the gang issues, because of the drug addictions. But my family did. And my family also suffered from many of those things. My father was in and out of prison. My mom and my father were separated. My mom suffered from drug abuse for most of my life. And so I spent a lot of my young years raising myself and ending up in places that I shouldn't have. I went to Carl Schurz High School when families didn't want to send their children to Clemente. And I got into my first school fight, right? As a young person, when you have family that suffers from addiction, suffers from repeat incarceration, you don't necessarily have the tools to socially and emotionally regulate. And you know, that caught up with me. I was expelled from Carl Schurz and ended up at a small alternative high school here called Albizu Campos Puerto Rican High School. And it's where I learned about colonialism, it's where I learned about my Puerto Ricanness, and ultimately is where I was politicized. Yeah, you know, I spent a lot of years in the community doing work with young people. I spent 10 years in education, 6 of them at Roberto Clemente and 4 of them back at my alma mater, really trying to be that school administrator I didn't have when I was at Schurz. When I got into that school fight, because someone had poked fun at my mom's drug addiction, no one asked me if I was okay. No one asked me if I needed anything. In fact, I remember being expelled without any due process or restorative practices. And so I wanted to be the person that asked young people how they were, if they needed anything, if they needed someone to talk to, did they need a space to kind of breathe and recollect. And it was through my time in education that I learned that we got a lot of policy work to do. Right? We have a lot of young people that go without resources. We have a lot of young people in the foster system. We have a lot of young people developing addictions very early. And we have a lot of young people engaging in risky behavior in our streets because they don't have safe places to be in. So I left education altogether in the midst of COVID, really working to do policy work and to make sure that our policy was thinking about our young black and brown people in the city of Chicago. Did that for about 2 years. And I tell folks all the time, when you're a policy advocate and you need to get legislators to do something and they don't, well, then you become the legislator. And so I chose to run for office because I wanted to be the person that passed laws and did things in city council based on the lived experience of communities like ours. Well, there's a lot of things that I want to see happen. I want to continue to develop and grow spaces for our young people. I want to make sure that we're transforming academic spaces and frameworks so that young people can learn about who they are and where they come from so they can be agents of change in our community. But our academic institutions have to instill that sort of confidence and inspiration in our young people and not necessarily educate people to a test, right? But educate them to their own growth and their own potential and their own leadership. And in a community like ours, we also have to fight for sustainability. We have to continue to combat gentrification, fight for affordable housing, make sure that we are building safe spaces where families feel comfortable raising their families here. And you know, the last piece that I think is super important for me is to continue to grow our economic corridors. Look, we could have thriving corridors of entertainment and shopping districts that don't have to be the Starbucks and the Targets of the world, but could be economic engines of our own people. And so for me, it's extremely important that when we talk about business development, we're talking about taking our small and pop business owners and giving them all the resources that they need so that they can provide for our community. And so here on Barrio Borinquen, Paseo Boricua, Puerto Rico town, as people know it, is a corridor for our people to live and thrive, have affordable housing, safe places for their young people, the best schools with the best curriculum, and have a strip where they can eat the best Puerto Rican food, have the greatest cocktail, and go shopping for gifts with their families. I imagine that we will be like the Leo Patria Puerto Rico in the city of Chicago. A world in the city is what we are all striving for.